All right. So what's going on, everybody? What's going on? What's happening? May peace and power elevation be to all of you. This your girl Tiffany coming through live in the fade. All right. So as you all know, that I am going to be dealing with the topic about the transatlantic slave trade. Now, I won't be able to deal with all of it all together because some of it you need to look on your own. Okay. Now, before I get started, let me explain why I am doing this topic. Because we still have people who have some form of, they having issues dealing with reality. People have an issue with understanding the historical context of things. So they try to create this utopia and put that into the reality perspective, which is not. Now, you can't change certain people mentality and how they think because obviously they're gonna still be stuck in the same mentality. Some people operate off of the rudimentary level, and I had to come to the realization of that some folks just operate from a rudimentary point of view, and they expect some little fairy tale information that they discover to become realistic, and that's not the case. Okay. I'm doing this because I want people to be able to go and look up things for themselves and be able to verify the information and not just go by hearsay. And I see a lot of time people go by the hearsay or go by a lot of misinformation, and they try to combine those elements together, which they totally do not work. Like it's like some form of juxtapose or something. Like they trying to juxtapose the situation or information, and it doesn't work like that. You can't just combine something that totally doesn't match. Like, because I mean it's two, especially if it's two different events and two different historical facts or whatever. All right. So I think that it would help to go into a little bit detail and show as I'm speaking about the whole history. Like this has an impact on us. This is very vital to us. All right. No matter how much you want to try to run away from it, no matter how much you get tired of hearing about the stories, that's a part of our history. That's a big part of our history, which is the transatlantic slave trade. And I'm talking about the African in the diaspora. I'm not just talking about the Black people in the United States. I'm talking about those in the Caribbean. I'm talking about those in the Latin countries. I'm speaking about those in South America. These things have made a great impact on us. Well, I shouldn't use the word great, but it has made a serious impact on us. All right. And it explains a lot about us being what the brothers in Team Osiris always say, Sudanic Creole. That's the term that the brothers use in Team Osiris, Sudanic Creole, which we know as African in the diaspora, basically. So it explains a lot of how we inherit the genes that we inherited. So I have some information dealing with genetics as well. All right. So, anyways, getting down to it. Now, what is the transatlantic slave trade? Okay. The transatlantic slave trade is a trade that took place within the Central West Africa region. All right. And since many of you may know, many of you may not know, yes, there were Africans that was involved in it. Okay. There was Africans that was involved in trading off other Africans to the Europeans. Okay. But what y'all don't know is, here's the backlash. Those same Africans, especially those that was in the royal family, guess what? They end up becoming slaves too. That's the part that y'all didn't know. They end up becoming slaves themselves. They end up getting caught up in that. And I can find some sources about that, but see, that's going to be another topic. As a matter of fact, there's one particular source about one prince that came from I think he was from the country of Guinea or Ivory Coast, one of them. And he was a prince. And he happened to be a Muslim, by the way. And he was brought here to America. And guess where he was at the whole time? For 40 years of his life. In Mississippi. Mm-hmm. He went from being a prince of a country to becoming a slave in Mississippi for 40 years. And by the time he got back to Africa, he didn't even get back home. He died in Liberia. And he was in his 70s. But it's a lot that goes into this. Like, y'all don't really understand. It's a whole lot of details. Okay? But I'm going to show some sources and I'm going to get started with this. And hopefully you guys, because this thing is starting to become redundant. It's like people do it so many times. People talk about it so much. And it's like you talk about it to the point where you get blue in the face and you get tired of it. So I'm addressing this to the so-called indigenous people, the ADOS people who don't understand, all right, and others. So yes, I'm going to present those sources to you, and hopefully you will look it up for yourselves. And if not, that's your ass. Oh well. Can't say ain't nobody said nothing. Can't say ain't nobody showed you nothing. All right, so let's go ahead and get started, shall we? All right. So as you can see right here, I am on the website. It's called slaveryandremembrance.org. Okay. So now I'm going to show you where it says under history and memory. Now it gives you the different contexts, all right, different subjects. It got the economics and slave trade, captures and captives, slave trade routes, West Africa, Central Africa, castle and factories and forts, Atlantic Ocean, Middle Passage, slave ship, Montanese, the Caribbeans, Salvador de Baja, Brazil, and Louisiana. And Africans in America, slavery in the Asia Revolution, emancipation movement, and slavery remembered. Now, let's go ahead and go right here. I got it highlighted for you. Where it says the transatlantic slave trade can be understood through the experiences of a single enslaved person who endured a series of catastrophic events that by design sever him or her from home, family, and nearly all things familiar. Capture in the African interior, transport to the coast, sell to slave traders, passage in a slave ship, and sell and enslavement in the Americas tested the spirit and will of the resilient men, women, and children who struggle to find meanings and happiness in a new world dependent upon their labor and cohesion. Okay? Check this out. The transatlantic slave trade can be understood through its sheer magnitude. For 366 years, European slavers loaded approximately 12.5 million Africans onto Atlantic slave ships, and about 11 million survived the Middle Passage to landfall and life in Americas. The transatlantic slave trade was an oceanic trade in African men, women, and children, which lasted from the mid-16th century until the 1860s. European traders loaded African captives at dozens of points on the the African coast, from Senegambia to Angola and round the Cape to Mozambique. The great majority of the captives were collected from West and Central Africa and from Angola. Okay. Did you get that? Did you get that part? The captives were captured from Central and West Africa. Okay, not from Israel, not from Egypt, but from Central West Africa. Let that resonate. Let's continue on. And then if you go down to here, okay, it said the trade was initiated by the Portuguese and Spanish, especially after the settlement of sugar plantation in the Americas. European planters spread sugar cultivated by enslaved Africans and plantations in Brazil and later Barbados throughout the Caribbean. In time, planters sought to grow other profitable crops such as tobacco, rice, coffee, cocoa, and cotton, with European indentured laborers as well as African and Indian slave laborers. Nearly 70% of all African laborers in the Americas worked on plantations that grew sugar cane and produced sugar, rum, molasses, and other byproducts for export to Europe, North America, and elsewhere in the Atlantic world. I was going to say Atlantic Ocean. Damn. Woo. Before the first Africans arrived in British North America in 1619, more than 500,000 African captives had already been transported and enslaved in Brazil. By the end of the 19th century, that number has risen to more than 4 million. Northern European powers soon followed Portugal and Spain into the transatlantic slave trade. The majority of African captives were carried by the Portuguese, Brazilian, the British, French, and Dutch. British slave traders alone transported 3.5 Africans to the Americas. Now, after reading all that, do you understand the premises of what the purpose of slavery was about? The main purpose of slavery was economics. That's the main purpose. It was a quicker way to make profit. The more slaves you have, the more profit you make. That's how the Europeans of today, right, become so privileged. They have become so privileged because of their ancestors who were slave owners, who had industrial business, who owned cotton fields. That's why. That's why you see a lot of these white folks today come from wealth. Because their ancestors reaped the benefit off of slavery here in America. And we don't come from wealth because our ancestors didn't reap the benefits of wealth. And yes, you had black people that owned slaves, but guess what? They didn't make the profit like their European counterparts did. So at the end of the day, it was no win for them either. So this is why you see the wealth gap as it is today, because many of us in our generation, we did not come from wealth. We came from slavery and poverty. That's where we come from. Okay? But let me continue on. Oh, Jesus. All right. So I'm going to read these two paragraphs right here. Then I'm going to click on another subject on this website. So it says here, the transatlantic slave trade was complex and varied considerably over time and place, but it had far-reaching and lasting consequences for much of Europe, Africa, and the Americas and Asia. First, it was a trade between European and African slavers who victimized millions of African men and women and children. Second, the profits gained by Americans and Europeans from the slave trade and slavery made possible the development of economic and political growth in the major region of the Americas and Europe. Okay? Now check this out. Europeans used various methods to organize Atlantic trade. Spain licensed by Jacinto agreements other nations to supply its Spanish American and Caribbean colonies with African captives. France, the Netherlands, and England initially used monopoly companies. Oh, what a key word, monopoly. You remember playing the game of Monopoly? If you ever want to know where Monopoly come from, that right there in itself is an influence. And I want to show you something right here. Right here, this is a contract. This right here is a contract, okay, by the Spanish. You see? See that damn contract right there? Yeah. Yes, they had contracts. And then some of you ask questions about this boats. Well, what happened to all the boats? Why we don't see no boats? Of course you're not going to see no boats because you can't find every boat. Did you not know that some of them boats damn shrink underwater? Do you think they're going to be able to find all the damn boats? No. That's going to take a long time to dig underwater to look for some damn boats that was used in slavery. So just because you don't see 50 million boats does not mean that slavery did not happen. I mean, God have mercy. Let me continue. All right, but let me continue on. In time, the demand for African laborers in the Americas was met by more open trade, which allowed other merchants to engage in the trade with Africans. Thus, formidable private trading companies emerged, such as Britain's Royal African Company, which lasted from 1660 to 1752. The Dutch West Indian Company of the Netherlands from 1602 to 1792. All right. So that's that part. Okay. Now let's look up the economics. All right. Now, again, economic played a major factor into why the slave trade happened. Let's read these first two paragraphs, okay? Or these first three paragraphs, rather. Now, it says the number of European and American merchants, shipbuilders, and investors directly involved in the transatlantic slave trade over a period of more than 350 years were immense. The system they designed in the collusions with African coastal traders and those involved in the auxiliary trades in Europe, Africa, and the Americas created far-reaching and ever-shifting tentacles of exchange that swept African individuals from their villages into an international commerce that placed them in new worlds as commodities. Through creativity, resilience, and faith, survivors of the Middle Passage and their descendants forged meaningful lives, circumscribed by the oppressive society in which they found themselves. Okay? Now, It is difficult to imagine that a system that once treated human beings as commodities with price tags was not only legal but was considered to be ethical and a major source of wealth, influence, and respectability for many. By the early 17th century, however, the transatlantic slave trade was a sophisticated commercial system that hinged on the availability of captives transported to the coast by African traders deep in the interior of the continent. Some African captives were sold multiple times. Some African captives were sold multiple times and detained for months in market, or was it, I think it's pronounced as was it barracoons, or whatever you call it, along interior slave routes before encountering European slave ships on the coast. Only after an already perilous passage from the interior were survivors exchanged for a combination of textiles, weapons, alcohol, and other European trade goods and loaded aboard large canoes that took them to slave ships anchored off the coast. All right. Now let's start right there. Okay? Let's start right there. After reading that, you got to remember, again, this dealing with economics. So, in return for trading off the slaves to the Europeans, what did they get? Alcohol, guns, and other materials. Now, slavery been going on for a very long time. Before the transatlantic slave trade was even thought of, you had slavery. You had slavery within the countries. Okay, you had slavery going on between tribes. All right. Now, for you ADOS people out there, you want to make an argument that we're not Africans. Oh, those are not our people because they sold us into slavery. But you're so proud to claim those who have enslaved you for the past 400 years, who beat your ass, who put whips all over you, who made you do all this hard labor. You proudly claim them before you claim those who you came from in the beginning. Now help me to make it make sense. Now this goes back to the concept about reparation. Yes, we believe that, but at the end of the day, your lineage does not change, okay? America is just your nationality. That's your nationality. But your ethnic, your lineage, your bloodline, if you look at your genetic composition, you will see that you are consist of more African blood. That's just what it is. There's nothing you can do about that. So that's just like saying I disown my whole entire family. You can't disown your whole entire family just because a few motherfuckers is full of shit and they ain't up to no damn good. You can't just do that. Because at the end of the day, even if you disown your family, guess what? The DNA doesn't change. It is what it is. Just like you say, the Caribbeans, they're not our people. The Jamaicans, they're not our people. That's your argument, right? But guess what? They really are your people. Because you come from the same bloodline. Did you not know that families were separated during slavery? Everybody didn't stick together. Everybody didn't see their mama and daddy. Everybody didn't have their brothers and sisters around. They were separated. They were separated. They separated families and sent them elsewhere. And some people had a chance to reconnect with their family members, and then there were those who never saw them again. Who never saw them again. So chances are, ADOS, especially, if you take your DNA, you might see, if you take 23andMe, especially, you might see in your composition that it goes down to say your recent ancestry. And under your recent ancestry, you might see that it says Caribbean. Okay? Because you know why? They were trading amongst each other too. They were trading from not only just in the United States, or what we call the United States, but they was also trading in the Caribbeans and in Latin Americas. So while you sit up here trying to diss and talk about the Haitian people and the Jamaicans and the Trinidadians and all that, y'all come from the same bloodline. So you come from the same people. And then you was enslaved by the same people that took your ass up out of Africa in the first place. Whether it be the French, whether it be the British, whether it be the Portuguese. Okay, well, the Portuguese wasn't in North America. Okay, whether it be the Spanish, you were enslaved by the very same people. You were enslaved by the Europeans. Period. Ain't no they people enslaved by that group of people. Well, that group of people that did all this dirty shit, that put them into slavery, had them do all that labor, was the same people that did to our ancestors. Now, how about that? You can't separate that. You can't make no distinction between that. You can't do it. The only distinction that you can make is it happened in the Caribbeans, it happened in South America, it happened in Latin America. That's all you can say. But guess what? It was the same people that did it to them also did to us. Except that it wasn't the Portuguese, because we didn't have to deal with the Portuguese here in North America. The Portuguese was mainly in South America. Okay? But at the end of the day, you come from the same bloodline. That's why I have a hard time when people try to make some type of assessment about the black folks here in America. It's hard to do that. You're not going to walk around here and ask somebody, hey, are you an American descendant of slaves? That's very offensive, for one. And that's stupid as hell. You don't got the time to do that. You ain't got no time to pinpoint and cherry pick who is a descendant of slaves and who's not. Because at the end of the day, in the Europeans' eyes, we still niggas. In the eyes of the white man, we still gonna deal with racism. In the eyes of the white man, we still gonna be dealing with police brutality. So it don't make no difference. It don't make no goddamn difference. The hell? So you ain't gonna fuck with somebody because they from Gambia? You crazy. You ain't gonna fuck with somebody because they from Barbados? Are you crazy? You ain't got time for that shit. You know what I'm saying? Now, there are some that are very naive and there are very, what's another word? They're very obnoxious, okay? There are those that are like that. And there are black people that are very obnoxious towards other black people here in America. So, and for you indigenous folks out there, you can stop that shit. You can stop all that. Oh, see, we are the original Americans. People, no, you're not. Cut that shit out. No, you're not. You're not the original American people. I'm sorry to tell you that, and I got some facts to verify that and debunk that shit too. Okay? But let's go ahead and continue on. All right? Now, right here it says a slave voyage was always a risky financial venture for the owners and investors. Through they plan all eventualities, everything could be thrown into turmoil by bad weather, poor navigation, slave uprising, and other physical dangers. Also, the nature of trade along the African coast was ever changing as desirability and value of particular textile designs and color, for examples, vary month by month and from region to region. Moreover, exposure to tropical disease invariably reduced the European crewmen's numbers on the coast and at sea. For these investors, the most serious of all was the loss of captains, surgeons, experienced sailors, and the human cargo. The ship captains draft both experienced and inexperienced sailor, which created risk for the ship's owners and investors. Slave ships were then dangerous, violent, and disease ridden. Okay. So now, I hope that answered the question about the ships. That answer your question about what happened to those ships. Why then some of them didn't come here to America? I just read that paragraph to you. I'm gonna show it. I'm gonna show you again. Okay, I'm gonna show you the paragraph. All right, so right here, you see the paragraph again. Now let's go down to the last part. It says, slave ships were then dangerous, violent, and disease-ridden. That's enough said right there. That should answer your question. All right, now I am going to skip down to the slave trade routes real quick. Okay. Now you got the Iberian slave trade, British slave trade, French slave trade, Dutch slave trade. All right, so, but I ain't gonna go into that because I ain't gonna have enough time to do all that. So, anyways, countless local and regional slave trades in Europe, Africa, and the Americas combined to create the transatlantic slave trade, an ever involving system of people, ships, and goods that transported at least 12.5 million Africans towards destination in Europe and the Americas over a period of 366 years. All right. So right here, it says the forced migration of African captives rely upon three complex, intertwined systems that marry the interests of European American investor traders and planters with those of African merchants and leaders. Investors in such port city as Bristol's, Natanz, and Salvador de Bahia. I'm not good at pronouncing everything, but that's okay. Established Atlantic circuits along with their vessels could obtain captive laborers to supply commercial plantation, mines, or factories in the America. A second and equally complex system created by African traders and leaders moved captives from nearly all regions of the African interior to coastal markets, where the two systems tragically merged and gave life to one another. A third system joined the others in the Americas as merchants purchased newly arrived Africans in New World ports and carried them to the secondary markets in overland or into colonial maritime trades that extended the horrific journeys of captives for weeks, months, or even years. Ooh, child. Nearly one third of all slave voyages were outfitted in Liverpool, London, Bristol, and other ports in Britain. French vessels from such ports as La Rochelle, Le Havre, Bordeaux, and Nantes made up another 13%. In the Americas, a number of slave ships were sent from the British Caribbean and Rhode Island in North America, and in the 19th century, especially from the Brazilian port cities of Recife, Salvador de Bahia, and Rio de Janeiro. All told, 90% of captives deported in the transatlantic slave trade were carried in ships from Brazil, Britain, France, Portugal, and the Netherlands. Okay, so that's that. Now let's look at West Africa because the topic is dealing with West Africa. All right. So now, as you can see the list right here, it says Goree Island, Sierra Leone, Gold Coast, which is now Ghana, Niger River, Wadia, Olo Empire, Blight, Biafra. Okay, now let's look at much of the African continent, north and west of the Blight of Biafra and south of the Sahara can be identified as West Africa. The European traders often define West Africa more narrowly as the area from Senegambia in the north to the Bight of Benin in the south. By either definition, the region displays significant geographic and cultural diversity. All right. And it says West Africa includes several different climates, region, from tropical forests in the coast, west and south to savanna, Sahel, and desert as one moves north. Each of these supported different kinds of agricultural and social organization in the savanna and the Sahel west of the Niger inland delta. The great empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai grew to control vast areas of territories. The empires of Mali and Songhai were both normally Muslim and both helped to spread Islam across the region. And I will deal with the information about the Muslim and Islam later. That'll be another topic. That'll be a part of this series. Okay. There we go. Okay. African political and military organization, along with disease, generally confined Europeans to the coast from the 15th throughout 19th centuries. Early European traders bought and sold gold, ivory, wood, cloth, food, and alcohol at various places across the region. Over time, a small commerce in captive Africans grew to encompass the large forced migration in the human history. All right. And then down here, as you can see, once sugar and other export crops began to cultivate in the Americas, nearly every Western European country participated in the transatlantic slave trade. To secure full cargoes, European traders built castles or factories at ports on the coast where they could collect people and goods for sale. These sites, places like Goree, Coast Castle, and Awuda, or Awuda, if I'm saying it right, often became launching points for European colonization in order to help ensure a steady supplies of captives from the interior. Slave traders began to add guns and other weapons to their portfolio of goods for sale. Over the course of more than 3.5 centuries, West Africa exported about half of the roughly 12.5 million Africans who entered the Atlantic. The warfare, disruption, underdevelopment, population decline resulting from the slave trade had a profound impact on West Africa. As the turn of the 20th century approached, Europeans became better able to penetrate the interior and quickly engage in efforts to colonize the continent. Let me read that part one more time. European became better able to penetrate the interior and quickly engage in efforts to colonize the continent. This scramble for Africa installed the French and British as the primary colonizers in the region until the start of successful anti-colonial independent movements. After the Second World War, Liberia was the sole independent nation in the region. Now, I'm going to leave it off for there because I really don't have a lot of time. But if you want to go check this out for yourself, just look up slaveryandremembrance.org. I'm going to highlight it for you, okay? Slaveryandremembrance.org. There you go. All right, so because I got other information I want to show you guys that's in relation to this as well. So check this out right here. This comes from Cambridge University Press, right? Okay. It's called Slavery and the Slave Trade in the Context of West African History. The Journal of African History. This was written in 1969, volume 10, number 3. Okay. Now, okay, just to give you the outline of what was going on, this was written by J.D. Fagg, if I'm saying it right. There have been at least 3 widely held and influential views about slavery and the slave trade in West Africa, and also about their relation to its society in respect both of their origins and their effects on it. Okay. Now it says the first is that the institution of slavery was natural and endemic in West African society, so that the coming of foreign traders with a demand for labor, whether from Muslim North Africa or from the countries of Maritime Europe, led swiftly and automatically to the development by West Africans of an organized trade in slaves for export. Okay. And the second is a contrary view that it was rather these external demands for labor which led to a great growth of both slavery and slave trading in West Africa, and so corrupted its indigenous society. And then there's the third view, which may or may not be associated with the second, is the external demand for West African labor, especially in the period circa 1650 to circa 1850, was so great that the export of slaves to meet it had a disastrous effect on the peoples of West Africa, disrupting not only their natural demographic development, but their social and moral development as well. All right, so this comes from Cambridge University. You can check this out for yourself. Okay, you can go on this website right here. I'm going to highlight it for you. There you go, right there. It's called jaster.com if you want to look it up. All right. Now, right here, it deals with the African diaspora, right? When we talk about mitochondrial DNA. Now, who carries the mitochondrial DNA? The main people that carry it is the women. All right, women carry mitochondrial DNA. However, it can be passed on down to both the male and female, but it's only the female that can pass her mitochondria down to both her children, if that makes sense. Okay, so when they talk about the mtDNAs, all right, just know that it's associated with the female or the maternal, those who have the maternal lineage. Okay, so check this out. Anyways, this is called the African diaspora, mitochondrial DNA, and the Atlantic slave trade. All right. Now, this was written back in 2004. Let's see. Here's the name: Antonio Sales, Martin Richards, Maria Victoria Larue, Alfredo Capa. That's the names of the authors of this article. Okay, so let's read the introduction real fast. Slavery has been a feature of human society since antiquity, but the scale of the Atlantic slave trade was unprecedented. This this African diaspora was the result of the enslavement in the Americas, and probably 11 million people and at least 2 million more died during the Middle Passage. The traders spread from Northwest Africa around the Atlantic Ocean, reaching Angola by the 17th century and Mozambique by the 19th. Historical records suggest that Western Africa contributed 8 million people, West Central Africa from Cameroon down to Angola 4 million, and Mozambique and Madagascar in the southeast 1 million more, although agreement on the details is lacking. Okay, the scale of displacement and the European prejudice against African population meant that rather than the assimilation of the imported population, as had often been the case in antiquity, the result was often the creation of new and distinctive population in the Americas. All right, so now it goes into the mtDNAs and the haplogroups, as you can see here. It talks a little bit about the haplogroups. I can't highlight it for whatever reason. Right, so you can check this article out for yourself. It's called The African Diaspora, Mitochondrial DNA, and the Atlantic Slave Trade. All right, so again, DNA doesn't have to lie. Now, to kill all this mythology about we was here before Columbus, we finna kill that shit. That shit dead. Oh yeah, that's dead. Check this out. Now, this is the article that debunked Dr. Ivy Van Sertima. Now, no disrespect to the ancestor. He did what he could. He was very knowledgeable. Excuse me. He was a very knowledgeable man, a very powerful man. But at the same time, he was wrong in some of his information. And it had to be corrected. It had to be challenged. It had to be vetted. Now, it's called They Were Not Here Before Columbus, Afrocentric Hyperdiffusionism in the 1990s. It was written by Bernard Ortiz de Michelano. Now, let's go ahead and get started. Okay. It says with increased frequency in recent years, students have asked college instructors and school teachers to comment on the validity of theories that claim that the ancient Egyptian, Nubians, and other Black Africans came to the Americas long before Columbus. At the same time, students have also asked whether there is any truth to the claim that the ancient Egyptian and Nubians might have influenced or might have created the first civilization to emerge in the Americas. Invariably, the response to these questions have been vague or contradictory. Some teachers and college instructors have summarily dismissed such idea as pure speculation, not worthy of discussion, while others, probably the majority, have tried to evade the issue entirely by pleading ignorance or by urging their students to investigate the matter further. It is clear, however, that a considerable number of students are baffled by such tentative, elusive, or dismissive responses. For example, students at the college level have noted that ideas with regard to an alleged pre-Columbian contact between Africa and the Americas have become an important part of the discourse in quite a number of introductory Africana or Black studies courses. At the same time, an increasing number of older college students of Native American or Latino background have acknowledged that their children are being exposed to such ideas in schools that have adopted the so-called Afrocentric approach to the study of human development. It should also be noted that many of these same people have already complained that such ideas are being presented as fact in a preachy and aggressive manner, and that they seem to minimize or even to appropriate the cultural contribution of Native Americans. Mm. Now, let's go ahead and let's skip down. It says speculation that Africans first came to Americas long before Columbus probably began in 1862 with the discovery of a carved uh, was a causal stone head that appeared to have the idealized classic future associated with African Negroes, specifically a broad, fleshy, round nose and thick lips. In the years that followed, speculation continued as other examples of what later became known as Olmec art were uncovered by antiquarians and archaeologists. In the early part of the 20th century, Leo Weiner, a professor of Slavic languages and literatures at Harvard University, wrote a 3-volume work entitled Africa and Discovery of America, which claimed that Abernized Black West African came to Americas in the century before Columbus and influenced the civilization of Mexico. Using a historical, literary, linguistic, and pseudo-linguistic analysis that was popular at the time, Weiner developed his idea further with the publication of Maya and Mexican Origins, 1926, which claimed that both uh, Nahuatl and Maya were connected to the medieval Mende languages of West Africa. Now that was a far reach right there. How is that possible? But anyways, these works, along with the discovery of other colossal stone heads with alleged Negroes features, fueled the speculation further. European, Anglo-American and African-American scholars and writers made references to these ideas and discoveries in their own writings. But Leo Weiner's ideas were quickly rejected and no concrete evidence ever turned up that demonstrated an African presence in the Americas prior to 1490s. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, most scholars had concluded that the alleged Negro features in Olmec portrait sculpture were in fact characteristics of the Native Americans that produced them. However, a number of African American writers were not quite convinced of this and kept the theory alive. For example, Harold Lawrence, a disciple of J.A. Rogers, wrote an article entitled African Explorers in the New World, which appeared in the Crisis magazine in 1962. This essay was followed by several others that were written by LeGrand Cleave, a Los Angeles area lawyer and college instructor, and published during the heyday of Black nationalist movement from the late 1960s to the late 1970s. However, the most important and influential work on this subject was to be written by Ivan Van Sertima, who published his book, They Came Before Columbus, the African Presence in Ancient America in 1976. All right. So as you can see, that information pretty much debunks the ideas about, that it pretty much debunks the idea of this whole notion that the Africans came before Columbus. And there's no premises or there's not enough evidence to verify that and to prove that. And then you got to remember, during the time Ivan Van Sertima, when he wrote that book in 1976, they did not have enough advanced technology to verify that to be true or not. So because of the lack of advanced technology, it was all dealing with speculation. All right, that's all dealing with hypothesis. So Ivan Van Sertima hypothesized that, Africans came here to America already. And so a lot of people take it and run away with it and saying that, we're indigenous people, we're indigenous to this land, without actually studying the context. And then you got folks that's listening to these folks like Dan Calloway, who sit up here and try to proclaim that shit and not go and do diligent research. So yes, you got to go and look into the scholarly information to back up the argument, to find out whether it's true or not. You have to do that. That takes a lot of work, but y'all want the microwave scholarship. Y'all want the microwave sources, and that's not how it works. You can't do it like that. That's all you're gonna get is a bunch of feel good. But just because it feels good and it sounds good doesn't mean that it's legit and it's 100%. Okay. All right. So that's that article right here. I'm not gonna read any more further. All right. And as you can see, they always quick to talk about, oh, you got that shit from the European, right? But guess what? A guy named Leo Weiner wrote that information. He wrote a book. Hold on. Let me go back and show that real quick. Let me show this real quick. Let me go back. Okay. He wrote a publication called the Maya and Mexican Origin, right? So, and he also wrote Africa and the Discovery of America in the 1920s and 1922. So for anything, before you even try to make that argument that we get our source of information from the white man, it was the white man that wrote that pseudo shit about Africans being in America before Columbus. He wrote that first before Ivan Van Sertima ever came across that. He wrote articles about that. Okay. He wrote this in the 1920s. See, that's something that y'all don't know. So miss me with that argument about you believing what the white man say. Miss me with that bullshit. All right, so let me hurry up and keep it moving. All right, and then this is another PDF right here. It's called The Affairs of West Africa, which is written by Edmond de Morel. All right. So here's the table of content. All right, so it goes in discovery of northern Nigeria, slave raiding and domestic servitude. Okay. It goes into all that details. All right. So you can check this PDF out for yourself. And then here's another one. It's called the Akan in the Diaspora. The Akan diaspora in the Americas. All right. So it's talking about the Akan people in the American diaspora. So it was written in 2010, Oxford University. Okay. By Kwesi Kanadu. All right, so here are the table of content. Let's look at the first one right here. So as you can see, on the diaspora and the Akan in the Americas. Let me pull this up a little bit. All right, so it says close to 10% of the total number, a little more than 1.2 million of the Africans shipped to the Americas between 1520 and 1865 came from the Gold Coast, contemporary Ghana, but the vast majority who were carrying a composite Akan culture could not temporarily realize the open proverbs. Any Akan who travels in the temporal and does not return home or visit frequently is considered a Quasi Pene, eldest of the fools, an insult of the highest caliber. However, this would have been an inappropriate charge for those who were transported to the Americas. Their journey was characteristically one way and not of their own volition. And they were certainly not immigrants on a middle passage, but rather uprooted captives turned commodities turned enslaved captives. Nonetheless, the pull to look back and go home was so strong that a small group in the early 19th century Jamaica told some of their shipmates whom they solicited to go with them, they would proceed the seaside by night and remain in the bush through the night. And the first canoe they found by the seaside, they would set sail for their country, which they conceived was no great distance. Justifiably, their eyes had turned back in the hope of going home, despite the not nautical miscalculation if the idea in the source matched the aspiration of those for whom it was written. Others probably did the same, but in their hearts and minds, while resigned to the process of social death and rebirth on the immobile slave vessel, the plantation on which they revolt or jump overboard or were forcibly transshifted between the Caribbean and mainland. Listen, forcibly transshipped between the Caribbean and mainland colonies possessed by the British, Dutch, Spanish, and French. Efforts to reverse the one-way voyage were rare, but the further instability and trauma of transshipment remained quite frequent, particularly, this is for you ADOS people, okay? Particularly between the Caribbean and North America. Efforts to reverse the one-way voyage were rare, but the further instability and trauma of transshipment remained quite frequent, particularly between the Caribbean and North America. And hold on, I'm not finished. On September the 14th, 1786, Kofi, after being shipped from Jamaica and arrived at a Louisiana port during its period of Spanish occupation and was sold within 2 days to Louis Bordeaux. The seller, Daniel Clark, also sold a shipmate named Cujo to Joseph Kalusha and then another Kofi to Pedro Segura. Cujo and the two persons named Kofi were categorized as Bozo or newly arrived from Africa, and they likely knew each other prior to and during their brief stay in Jamaica. Shipmates on the board the Nueva Orleans, or known as New Orleans, these adult male black from the Gold Coast, also known as the Mima Coast via Jamaica, were part of the influx of Africans from the Gold Coast to Jamaica between 1781 and 1785. An import of nearly 25,000 people, or 42% of all Africans, transported to Jamaica during that short period. Now, that's enough said right there. Okay? Now, again, you can look that information up. Ooh, shit. Hold on. Let me get that. Okay. So again, you can look this information up for yourself. All right, then there's another information called the African Voices of the Atlantic Slave Trade, Beyond the Silence and the Shame, Anne C. Bailey. You can look that up. It was written in 2005, so you can find that information on the PDF. Okay, right there. Oh my God. Okay, and then you got the other one, Senegambia and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. All right. So there we go. And this was written in 1988. So there's a table of content. You can look that up for yourself as well. Okay. All right. So with that being said, you guys, I have to log off of here. And I thank you all for watching. For those of you that were watching, and if you want to share this video, you're more than welcome to do so. If you are on the YouTube channel, please make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell, and share the channel and share the videos if you want to do so. Until then, please also check out Team Osiris, Reloaded, on YouTube. Team Osiris Reloaded. They just posted up the video about the Sudanic Creoles, so please check it out for yourself. All right. But till then, this your girl Tiffany. And with that being said, I am out of here, and I hope you all have a productive day. Okay? Now take it easy. Deuces. Until next time, may peace and power elevation be to all you.